Long before time as we know it, before the universe exhaled its first spark of light, there was only eternity, whole, immaculate, alive in the presence of the Most High. At the heart of this eternity, God dwelled, surrounded by myriads of angels, each created with a purpose, a song, a flame. Among them one stood out with unmatched brilliance, Lucifer, the bearer of light. Lucifer wasn't merely beautiful. He was the very embodiment of celestial beauty. His eyes reflected galaxies not yet born. His voice was pure music. His appearance radiated majesty, adorned with precious stones, fabrics of flame, ornaments pulsating with the glory of the Creator. He walked among the rubies of God's throne and led the heavenly choirs with burning passion. He was the firstborn of worship. Yet in the silence of stars yet unformed, a whisper was born, not from heaven, but from deep within Lucifer's own heart. A thought, a doubt, an ambition. Like a crack in the purest glass, something within him wondered, what if I am more than a reflection? What if the light I carry is mine? It was the beginning of an undeclared rebellion, subtle as the shadow before dusk. Every act of worship, once pure, became calculated. Each song that once elevated, now hinted at glory, redirected to himself. Jealousy took root, not of creation, but of the Creator. The light he carried began to curve inward, like a star collapsing. Every act of worship, once pure, became calculated. Each song that once elevated now hinted at glory, redirected to himself. Jealousy took root, not of creation, but of the Creator. The light he carried began to curve inward, like a star collapsing. And God, who sees all, did not stop him immediately. He allowed Lucifer's freedom to flourish, even knowing the cost it would bring. For love to be true must be free, and freedom includes the possibility of turning from the light. Cinematically, imagine a palace of living gold, where angels dance like fire and shine like crystal to the music of eternity. And there, at the center of it all, a radiant being who begins to gaze not at the throne, but at his own reflection. This was the beginning of the greatest celestial drama, a story of glory, pride, and the seed of what would become the most devastating rebellion. Lucifer's heart, once the throne of the purest worship, had become a mirror of vanity. He still sang, he still led the choirs, but something had shifted, a subtle alteration in intent. Praise that once rose like incense to the throne of God now began to orbit around himself. The song remained, but its spirit had changed. Quietly, he began to gather followers, not by force, but by allure. Many angels admired him not just for his beauty, but for his leadership, his voice, his presence that seemed an echo of divine majesty. And like a stone cast into still waters, his doubt spread in waves. Why must everything revolve around him? Were we not created with splendor? Why can't we reign beside the throne? These questions, whispered in celestial halls, did not seem like rebellion at first, only curiosity. But they were seeds, and Lucifer knew exactly how to plant them. He did not shout, he whispered. He did not demand, he inspired. And slowly, a legion of stars began to turn toward his light. Then came the dream of a throne. Not God's throne, but one he would build himself above the stars. I will ascend to the heavens, he thought. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will make myself like the Most High. That was the moment when desire became ambition, and ambition sin. But God, in his infinite wisdom, remained silent. He knew the end from the beginning. He knew that even evil would be used for a greater good, not because he desired it, but because nothing escapes his sovereignty. Then came the day. The day heaven fell silent. Lucifer's brilliance now burned with another fire. He no longer reflected, he consumed, no longer worshipped, he demanded worship. War had not yet begun, but heaven already felt the weight of betrayal. Angels looked at one another. The universe, still without time, waited. and upon the throne the Eternal simply watched. For the story was about to change forever. Then came the fracture. The eternal harmony that once pulsed through the halls of heaven like a divine symphony was suddenly torn. What began as a silent whisper had grown, a storm of thought, ambition, and rebellion that could no longer be concealed beneath the beauty of praise. Lucifer, once the radiant reflection of God's glory, now blazed with a different fire. No longer did he reflect light, he hungered to be its source. Before the host of heaven, in a voice that resonated like thunder through crystal halls, he proclaimed, "Why must all things orbit one throne? Are we not wondrous, crafted with brilliance? Should we not also rise?" His words, seductive and stirring, didn't demand. They inspired, they questioned, and those questions, like seeds, fell into the hearts of many angels. It wasn't coercion, it was enchantment, a call to self-glory disguised as revelation, and thousands answered. The rebellion was not one of violence at first. It was ideological, philosophical. Worship shifted subtly, not outwardly, but inwardly. Songs still soared in heavenly heights, but now, for many, their true direction curved inward, toward ego, rather than the eternal heaven. For the first time felt divided. Michael, the archangel of judgment, beheld this rising tide. He was not moved by fear, but by unwavering loyalty to the Most High. His presence flared like lightning when truth was challenged, and in the moment of decision, he stepped forward, not with rage, but with righteous fire. "Who is like God?" he roared. Not a question, a challenge, a rebuke, a declaration of allegiance. That's when the heavens exploded into war. It was not a war of matter, it was a war of will, of loyalty, of light against counterfeit light. The stars themselves shuddered. Wings clashed like thunder. Celestial armies collided in a spectacle that defied time and space. No blood was shed, for spirit bleeds differently, through grief, through betrayal, through the collapse of trust. At the center of it all sat the throne. Untouched, unmoved, unshaken, God did not rise to fight. He simply was. The light does not contend with darkness, it exposes it. And in that exposure, Lucifer's brilliance was shown to be hollow, self-fed, destined to consume itself. Like a falling star, he was cast down. He did not fall alone. A third of the angels, now rebels, plummeted with him, not merely expelled, but exiled by their own will, choosing pride over purity, ambition over adoration. The war was over, but heaven did not rejoice. The victory was bitter, not because the wrong was defeated, but because the fallen were once family. The first traitor was not a monster. He was once heaven's brightest sun. The silence that followed the fall was not one of relief, it was one of mourning. Heaven, though victorious, was wounded. The perfect harmony that pulsed like living music since before time now bore a dissonant note, a reminder that even at the throne of perfection, free will could wound. The universe, still newborn, shimmered with the glory of creation, yet a shadow had been cast, not by the Creator's failure, but by the creature's choice. And that shadow was not confined to the void. It stretched toward worlds yet to be formed. The echo of Lucifer's fall would ripple through ages, realms, and civilizations until it reached the hearts of humankind. Lucifer, no longer the bearer of light, but the embodiment of separation, awoke in the abyss. Where once there was melody, now there was only echo. Where once there was glory, now there was emptiness. His eyes, once full of stars, now burned with the memory of all he had lost. And in the silence of that new realm, dark, cold, severed, he made a vow. If I cannot reign in heaven, then I shall reign wherever darkness exists. Thus hell was born, not as a place created by God, but as a consequence of the choice to reject the light. And over time, the abyss took shape. Black thrones emerged among flaming stones. fallen legions pledged allegiance to a new order. It was not a kingdom of honor but of pride, not justice but vengeance. Each being bore the echo of former glory, twisted by pride. Meanwhile, in heaven, the Most High did not weep from weakness, but from love. For the Father who creates with perfection also feels the pain of loss. And even in the face of rebellion, the divine plan was not defeated. On the contrary, it had only begun to unfold, because even in the fall, God sowed redemption. The silence between realms was not empty, it was gestation. What seemed to be the end was in truth the beginning of a plan far deeper than heaven or hell could comprehend. Because in the very moment Lucifer was cast down like lightning, God looked beyond the fall, to the cross. Redemption wasn't born of pain, it was born of love. As the exiles built thrones in the abyss and declared their false royalty, the Eternal was sowing the promise of restoration, not as a reaction to failure, but as a revelation of his character. For the God of eternity does not merely judge, he restores. He doesn't just correct, he transforms. And he does it not from obligation, but from love. It was written in eternity, a time would come, a place, a people, of flesh, fragile but with an eternal soul. They would be lower than the angels, yet carry the breath of the Creator. They would be the field where the seed of love would bloom or be crushed. There the true war would unfold, not in the heights of fire, but in the depths of the human heart. Lucifer, now Satan the adversary, knew he had lost heaven, but not the war. He turned his focus to God's new creation, mankind, not because he hated the clay, but because he envied the destiny promised to living dust. And so, when Eden bloomed, the enemy was already watching. When the breath was given, he was already scheming. Because the greatest weapon of deception is not force, it is distortion. Not the shouting of lies, but the whispering of half-truths. But the plan was already unfolding. God was not surprised by the serpent. The lamb had already been prepared. Before there was a fall, there was already a cross. Before the error, there was blood. And that blood would not merely cover sin, it would destroy the root of deception. Lucifer fell through pride. Humanity would fall through disobedience, but the Son would rise through perfect obedience. And in the end, the throne Lucifer tried to steal would be won, not by force but by sacrifice, because in God's universe the greatest is not the one who takes, but the one who gives.